What's up, guys? I'm ThePopRocker, and today we're back with another fantasy wrestling booking video, which are the only videos that none of my audience watches except my wrestling fans, and ironically are the only videos of mine that they will watch. Now today I'm not booking any big major wrestling event that's coming up soon, because depending on when this comes out, that's probably Hell in a Cell, and nobody cares about that. Instead, I'm doing something a little bit different. I am booking Roman Reigns for 2021 and some of 2022. If you haven't watched my previous fantasy wrestling bookings, the Royal Rumble video and the WrestleMania video, you might want to go back and do that. I'll have links down below because everything's going to kind of tie in together. If you don't feel like doing that, I don't really know why this is the first one of these that you would be watching. But either way, I'll still take you back to the Royal Rumble 2021 and give you a bit of a brief refresher on what is important to this story. Now, the biggest thing to note, really the only thing to note, is a lot of people were expecting The Rock to show up in the Rumble, maybe start a feud with Roman Reigns. Maybe not necessarily expecting him to, but kind of thinking it was a possibility. In mine, he did not show up. He wasn't 35. Brock Lesnar won the Rumble and went on to WrestleMania. And this is where our story begins. Not at WrestleMania, right after the Rumble. So the SmackDown after the Rumble, Reigns is giving a big promo about whatever it is that he did at the Rumble that wasn't fighting Kevin Owens. I don't even know if I decided something. But he's talking about it, and The Rock shows up. The Rock comes out and basically starts putting Reigns in his place. It's cute that you think you're running things now. Just because I'm not wrestling and I'm off in Hollywood, I'm running the entire entertainment industry. I'm giving this family a bigger spotlight and a bigger legacy and a bigger security than you ever could. So let's stop with the tribal chief nonsense. Stop spewing the rhetoric. Get back to being just a B-class fighter is essentially where he's going with it. Reigns obviously isn't happy with this. He's like, you know what? You think you're the alpha? You think you're the one running stuff? Come get in the ring and fight. I can't really prove to you that I have surpassed you if you're too scared to come fight me. Rock laughs the whole thing off. He says, it's not that I'm afraid to come fight you, Reigns. It's that I can't fit you into my schedule. You are too insignificant to fit between my coffee breaks. But I have a friend that I've brought to humble you instead. And that friend is CM Punk. Because, like, Rock and Punk are kind of friends. They had that one thing where Rock tried to call him. I guess it'll make sense. The point is, so we're setting up kind of like an idea of like going through some bosses. Not to like spoil things too much. I'd say as far as like wrestling legends go, I don't want to use legends in the same term that WWE does, but as far as like the high profile guys that conceivably could be in WWE that Reigns could fight, CM Punk fits that. And CM Punk, you might not think is like one of the top people Reigns should be fighting, and that's why he's first. He's first up. It just so happens to be at WrestleMania, the biggest show of the year. That's not important. That's insignificant. And the promos are going to be fantastic. The promos are really the centerpiece of this feud because CM Punk's going to be the best one on the mic of all of them. Someone's going to be upset that I said that later, but he is. Anyway, The Rock brings CM Punk out. He kind of sets up their feud for them, the little making your dolls fight. He wants CM Punk to kind of humble Reigns, fight for his title, take it, put him back in his place, and he kind of says to both of them, don't make me come back. Now, as far as their actual feud goes, I kind of hate the idea of everyone always putting like CM Punk's like opinions about the company and, you know, reflecting his pipe bomb and everything into any fantasy feud for him returning ever, which by the way, he's never gonna do. But I mean, until like we see a feud for real where that happens and we can get past it, it's really all you have to go off of. I mean, we could start with the springboard of like their history together. The Shield wouldn't be anything if you all hadn't been interfering in my life and leading me to leave, ruining my shot against that guy that just left. But it still is eventually going to break down into Punk kind of spewing out the Reigns, you aren't the guy in charge here. You aren't the one running the place. You are simply the muscle for the man who's sitting in the office. The day he gets tired of you, he'll get the next shiny toy and bring him in to replace you anyway. And Reigns just shuts that down. Reigns comes back saying, you know, I'm not here because of this company. I don't care about the company. I will burn this company down if I have to prove to everyone else that I am the tribal chief. I run the wrestling business as a whole. I am bigger than the wrestling business. Best in the world. Obviously, that's meant to get under Punk's skin a little bit, and it fuels their fire, and they end up having a fight. And in the opening match of WrestleMania, not the main event, CM Punk loses. As far as the story is concerned, we don't see him again. He'll probably pop up at some point in my head. Of course he will. But then, as you'll remember from my last video, at the end of WrestleMania Night 2, Brock Lesnar defeats Drew McIntyre for the WWE Championship, goes to the stage and to the back to celebrate, and on his way, Roman Reigns intimidates him into vacating the belt and leaving the company. And then, as we all, as wrestling fans know, in between your major big four feuds, you have to just have a bunch of filler feuds that don't matter. So Roman Reigns will go up against Daniel Bryan coming out of Mania. And other than the stuff with Edge and the whole WrestleMania narrative, obviously that has to get taken out, I'd leave it pretty much exactly the same. WWE honestly did a good job with the story between Bryan and Reigns and like the things that happened with their characters and everything. Even all the way up to having Reigns retire Daniel Bryan. I think it was great. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So that's going to stay the same. But then as we transition slowly into the SummerSlam feud, maybe, you know, a little bit of crossover here, The Rock returns again. This time, he's not happy that Reigns beat CM Punk. Who would be? Rock has to come deal with his cousin. And he brings Jimmy with him. Jimmy and The Rock. It's kind of a 2-on-2 feud thing. Maybe they'll have a tag team match at Hell in a Cell or something. Don't care. The biggest idea is as much as the focus is on Reigns versus The Rock and their feud, that I don't really need to explain much more. You kind of know where that is. Jimmy and Jay have their own thing going on. They're not just side pieces. A lot of SmackDown is based on them doing their thing and who's going to side with the other one, because eventually you know it's going to be one or the other. At SummerSlam, The Rock fights Reigns for his belt. Rock says, I don't need this championship. I don't wrestle here. I don't need to be the Universal Champion. But if I'm beating you, I might as well take your belt from you too. And you know what? Put Rock's career on the line too. Jimmy betrays The Rock, sides with his brother, not with Roman Reigns. They just happen to be together. That's kind of the specific point there. And The Rock loses, The Rock retires, The Rock does not become Universal Champion. And now you're thinking, but if this was supposed to be some progression of bosses, how did you already dispatch The Rock at SummerSlam? What possibly comes next? We'll get there, child. So coming out of SummerSlam, the next kind of interim filler feud for Reigns is Nakamura. And they kind of do that basically the same way that they did with Cesaro. Actually, Cesaro can be there too. He can kind of feud with both of them. One at one pay-per-view, one at another, stuff like that. But the idea behind the whole thing is, as much as they're getting their main event time, they are more like placeholder background characters for the Reigns family drama. Jimmy Uso betrayed The Rock for Roman Reigns and Jay, but he's not fully on board with Reigns. WWE's doing a really good job with Roman Reigns. My booking when I started this was way back in like December, when I kind of thought it was all going to start falling apart. They brought it together. They're killing it. So a lot of their stuff is kind of going to be the same. So the dynamic here is kind of about Jay and Reigns like really convincing Jimmy to join their side fully and like stand beside them, much in the same way that Jay needed to be convinced more after he lost to Reigns. I think one of the easiest ways to describe what I'm trying to say is so Reigns does his thing where he'll put out hits. He'll send Jay out to go attack someone. Jimmy does all of that when Reigns says it too. If he's told to go attack someone, he does. But it's kind of clear that he's not doing it because Reigns told him to. It's because he doesn't really care. and we'll do it anyway. So as this is going on with Nakamura and Cesaro and the Usos, we're building towards
Survivor Series.
and that usually means brand versus brand warfare eventually. In the 3 months, 2 or 3 months between SummerSlam and Survivor Series, Reigns has really started getting into his ego. He's been champion for a year. He's destroyed everyone who's come in his way. He's retired 2 superstars, The Rock and Daniel Bryan. He's really getting that ego. Like, if you think he has an ego now, his ego's on fire heading in towards Survivor Series. He started just attacking random members of the roster and forcing them to acknowledge him. It's become a thing that like spreads throughout all of the storylines. Not necessarily in like he's the one in charge of everything, but like you just see random people, you get their sides, you know whether they're for Reigns or against Reigns. Even if they never do anything for him. They don't, join his little faction, I guess, that's kind of forming. They don't help him in anything, but it's almost, you could kind of compare it to like a political campaign. I don't know who's Carmella. Carmella's like, oh yeah, Roman Reigns is running SmackDown. Cool with that. Baron Corbin's a big one who will not let that stand. Baron Corbin would never acknowledge Roman Reigns as tribal chief. As far as some of the main superstars, this kind of starts to form a little rift, and that's going to be one of our main Survivor Series matches. Is the 5-on-5, not between the brands. So we've got a big 5 that do not accept Reigns, do not acknowledge him, stand up against him. Baron Corbin, Kevin Owens, Rey and Dominic Mysterio, and Shinsuke Nakamura. And I also want to note they're not all heel or face. Corbin isn't on the same side as Nakamura. They just both have a common enemy. So it's still a heel-face dynamic. And then over on the other side, you've got obviously Jey Uso is going to be running that team. Jimmy probably won't fight because I don't want 2 of the 5 spots to be Usos. I want to mix it up some. Let's keep it interesting. Sami Zayn is for Reigns. Cesaro comes around and he's for Reigns because that's a little interesting dynamic. Chad Gable fights for the cause, and Big E, but he doesn't seem the most happy about it. He's still on his, if you remember from the Rumble thing, his whole like, my mind is breaking because I have to keep doing the wrong things, but I'm doing it because I want to be champion. He had to basically put down New Day. He's kept that mindset and that attitude forever. He like doesn't talk anymore. Heyman talks for him. He's a Heyman guy still. Anyway, there's other people. Rollins gives his support to Reigns, Apollo Crews, Street Profits, Dirty Dogs, or whatever their name is. A lot of the roster supports Reigns, but for a lot of them, the vibe is more of just, yeah, sure, let Reigns be in charge as long as I can keep doing what I'm doing. Someone that I know compared the dynamic between Reigns and Rollins as like Batman villains, and I think that's kind of the idea. Keep that going. Cruz is another one. The Dirty Dogs are off doing their little thing. A lot of them are like Batman villains all doing their own thing, and they're just like, okay, Roman Reigns is in charge of Gotham right now. That's fine. I don't need to be in charge of Gotham. I just need to kill the Batman, Or they're kind of like the Street Profits, where it's like, not my problem. Reigns is running it. I don't want to. Somebody's got to. It's not an army with Reigns. It's just people kind of in support. They have their own tribe and acknowledge that he's the chief of it, but they go about their day. It even spills over into Raw occasionally. They'll be doing their thing, and Reigns will just show up just to make sure everyone's staying in line. The Usos will show up at NXT and just, put down the fashion police in the middle of a match just to make sure everyone knows that they're running the place. If they want to take the belts and they want to take over NXT, they can. Roman Reigns says so, but they won't. The Reigns team wins. But what is Reigns doing during all of this? Well, like I said, he's kind of started going off the deep end. He is a megalomaniac, running wild on SmackDown, and management has lost control of him. Sonya Deville, Adam Pearce, even Vince McMahon at one point are seen trying to rein him in, no pun intended, but they can't. If he wants to throw Adam Pearce off the stage because he doesn't get his way, he does it, and no one can stop him from doing it. So Vince McMahon goes to Triple H. and says, look, Roman Reigns has become a problem, and I need you to fix it. It's like Vince is saying to Triple H, if you want to run this company when I'm gone, it's time to start proving that you can do what needs to be done. Show me that you are a worthy person to stand in my place when I'm gone, kind of thing. And Triple H loses. Of course he does. Maybe that reflects poorly. Maybe he doesn't get to take over the business later. Maybe that's the thing. I don't care. This is about Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is on a tear. Roman Reigns has the full support of the roster. Wink, wink. He's going crazy. And up steps Seth Rollins. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily that Seth Rollins steps up, even though that's the last sentence I said. It's more so that their little, like, Batman villain coexistence kind of falls apart. They start getting in each other's way. Like we sort of saw with him and Cesaro and everything going on with that. But it's in December instead of now. And it gets to the point, the more it goes on, the more Reigns' ego grows, to the point where he literally thinks he could be like a god. Like, he thinks he is the greatest thing to ever come to wrestling, the greatest thing to ever happen to his family. And Rollins, you know, probably a couple fights into their feud, almost starts to break character. You know, it's like the deep down Rollins underneath the drip god bad guy thing sees his brother, deep down Roman Reigns, disappearing, and he kind of steps out of himself to try to like save his brother and bring him back. You know that scene in A Christmas Story where Ralphie just loses it on the bullies and he starts going off, and the little guy kind of like has like an emotional moment where he's like, hey, look, stop, like we've been playing this whole time, but we're not playing anymore. That's the energy that the end tail of this feud has. Rollins is like, look, I get it. We're wrestlers. We're in the wrestling business. We're doing this thing. Like, oh, we're the bad guys and everything, but like, for real, man, like, dial it down. But the biggest thing Reigns keeps trying to remind Rollins, and just keeps trying to hammer into every feud he has, really, every appearance he has, is that he is the tribal chief. He is in charge. These are his people, and he is leading them, and they need to understand and acknowledge that. And everyone thinks he's crazy. Everyone thinks he's turning into some kind of like dictator or something. And he keeps telling them, like, no, I am your chief. I am in charge. You've got to keep that aspect to it. Because one day, the monster returns. Brock Lesnar comes back. And this is a Brock Lesnar we have not seen yet. He's got a beard. He's got nothing but death in his eyes. And he starts destroying wrestling. Now, this is where the whole story comes together in the end. When I originally started putting this whole story into place in my mind, this was the redemption story for Lesnar. Lesnar was going to get embarrassed at WrestleMania, come back, be the hero to stop the monster that Reigns was, and finally, after all these years, learn some kind of honor or something and redeem himself for being the beast incarnate and save SmackDown. But there's a few problems with that. Number one, kind of unrealistic to expect that from Lesnar. Number two, it's not the most satisfying ending to everything. And number three, which is probably the most important one. See, when we all originally started the whole fan campaign to get Roman Reigns to turn heel, one of the biggest pieces of evidence towards it that would come up is when it happened with The Rock or when it happened with New Day. In wrestling, sometimes there's major players who you try to push as a face early on, and it just doesn't quite work. And if you do it right, one of the best methods to get it to work eventually is turn them heel, feed into the crowd hatred, give the crowd a reason to hate the person they already so desperately want to hate. And then when that character starts to surpass the level of love to hate bad guy, And just once they're on the crux of the love part, you turn them face, and they become one of the biggest faces you've ever seen. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to achieve with Reigns. How do we get there from megalomaniac psychopath? Brock Lesnar returns, starts running a rampage. He'll show up random times and destroy the set. It won't even have to do with the main event. It could just be in the middle of an episode of SmackDown or random segment on Raw, something with The Fiend, and Brock Lesnar will just show up and destroy it. Very close to just tearing through the fourth wall. Alexa's Playground's happening. Lesnar just comes up and destroys the swing set, and Alexa just left standing there. Stuff like that, where he's just destroying the idea of the show. It's making it less entertaining to watch because Lesnar is ruining it. He'll show up in the middle of a tag match on SmackDown and just break Montez Ford's leg. Just because he can. He's had months just alone in his own head. Heyman has nothing to do with this. Heyman can't get through to Lesnar. Nothing will. 3 months ago, Roman Reigns was the biggest threat to wrestling back at Survivor Series. And Lesnar has shown up and immediately surpassed that. And one day, he shows up in the main event. Let's make it a pay-per-view. Let's make it the one after the Rumble. Or the Rumble. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is, it's the blow-off match between Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. These two have been going at it. They've had multiple matches together. Roman Reigns has burned the bridges of their friendship. He's sullied the name of Dean Ambrose, who left. He's basically destroyed any memory of the Shield and any camaraderie or brotherhood that they've had. That's the finale that we're seeing happen. And Lesnar shows up and ruins it. He gets Rollins down. He has Rollins in the Kimura lock, looking like he's gonna break his arm. Bad too. Like he might shatter his shoulder. He's gonna do something horrible. And Roman Reigns stops him with no hesitation either. It's assumed he's probably out on the apron. He's kind of got rocked a little bit by Lesnar. As soon as he regains his consciousness and where he's at, he immediately jumps on Lesnar and saves his friend. And then the next SmackDown, Reigns comes out. The Usos have been having some trouble with him at this point because they're not fully okay with everything he's been doing. They've almost kind of abandoned him. So he comes out solo to give his promo after everything that's happened. He says, "I'm not addressing any member of the WWE universe, nobody at home. You all just get to watch. I'm specifically here to talk to the roster of the WWE, more specifically the SmackDown roster. Now, I know that a lot of you haven't been happy with the way I've been running things for the past year and a half. I know some of you don't agree with the things I've said, don't agree with the things I've done. You think I'm a pretty bad guy. And I stand by everything that I've done. Because the purpose of what I've been doing is to cement myself as the alpha here, as the tribal chief. And as leader, I need you all to acknowledge me and stand beside me. And I knew a lot of you wouldn't want to do that. I know egos run high in this business. Everyone wants to be the top dog. I needed to assert my dominance and let you know I am that top dog. So that when we as a family are faced with a threat like Brock Lesnar, and I step up to challenge him at WrestleMania, I know the rest of you are going to fight beside me. When the time comes, if I need your help to save our business, you will do so. I haven't enjoyed doing everything I've had to do. I've enjoyed very little of it. But you all have seen what I'm willing to do to my family when the time comes. What I'm willing to do to my friends. So you can all imagine what I'm going to do to that son of a if I ever see his face in a WWE ring again. And out comes Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar obviously doesn't have a mic. He's not here to talk. He's here to fight. Lesnar stands on the stage, laughs at Reigns, and rushes him. He's ready to kill this man. He's ready to murder Roman Reigns. Just when it seems like the fight's going to go on a little too long, like maybe Reigns isn't prepared for Brock Lesnar, isn't able to handle himself, here come Jimmy and Jey Uso. They come to fight beside him. They get Lesnar off of him. And they stand next to Roman Reigns. Lesnar, still crazed. He obviously steps back for a moment. But you kind of get the feeling that he can still take all three of them. But he doesn't. He kind of takes a moment, takes a breath, steps out. You know the fight's not over, obviously. But he starts walking back. And as he does, as he starts walking up the ramp, behind him, every member of the SmackDown roster walks out and forms a wall in front of him. They might not like it. We might not like it. But for the rest of this feud, Roman Reigns becomes the hero, not that we deserve, but that we need in this moment to save WWE. Now, not everybody is on his side. Slimy little Baron Corbin, he'll end up helping Lesnar at some point. Shelton Benjamin will probably come over from Raw. He'll help Lesnar at some point. But that's it. Every other member of the SmackDown roster, because this isn't going to bleed over into the others too much, but every SmackDown member, anytime they can, stands up against Lesnar. However, this doesn't stop Lesnar. It just makes it a little harder for him. But he's still the most dominant force in the company. So when WrestleMania comes, even though I didn't want to do this at WrestleMania, I would have much rather had this end earlier, but a moment like this, you have to have happen at WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns in the main event one more time. Of all the matches that Vince McMahon has given us where he wanted to coronate Roman Reigns as the guy, this is the one where it happens. Roman Reigns proves himself, proves why he's the guy in charge, why he's the locker room leader. He defeats Brock Lesnar, and we never see Lesnar again. Reigns has ended the man who ended the streak. He cements himself as the rightful face of the company, because anytime the company needs him to defend them, he's there to do it. Which is why it's really annoying when Paul Heyman turns on him and Big E beats him for the championship. And that has been my fantasy booking for Roman Reigns' year. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know down in the comments below. And while you're there, let me know where you think Roman Reigns should go for the rest of the year. Should he stay champion? Should he turn face? Who knows? If you like what you see, like, share, subscribe, the whole thing. But most importantly, tell your friends about the channel. And until next time, I've been the Pop Rocker, and I'll see you in the next video.